It's my pleasure to welcome you all to the Bay of Bengal conversation and to this special session on uh, US India overlapping in spheres of influence in South Asia. We, to discuss on this particular topic, we have two very special guests with us. On my left, I have Dr. Ali Riaz. Riaz, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Okay, my name is Ali Riaz. I teach at Illinois State University in USA, and my other affiliations are I'm a non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council and also is the president of the American Institute of Bangladesh Studies.
Welcome, welcome, Riaz. And you are a well known face in Bangladesh as well. Yes, and on my right, I have Samir Ahmad from Kashmir University, India.
Yes,
Samir, would you
yes.
like to say a little bit about
Okay.
yourself for
Uh,
our guests?
my name is Samir Ahmad, and I teach political science at Gandhi Memorial College, which is affiliated to the University of Kashmir. Besides, I also am a guest lecturer at the Skidmore College, New York. Thank you.
Thank you, Samir, and welcome to Bangladesh and
Thank
welcome
you.
to this Bay of Bengal conversations.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Uh, at this point of time, when we are talking about Bay of Bengal conversations, we know how geopolitics is changing and the kind of rivalries and contestations that is taking place in this region. And we do see a change in the global scenario, no? Also at the regional level. So, if I may borrow a terminology from political science and international relations, we see the level of analysis thing, coming in a very strong way. At the global level, there are changes. At the regional level, also at the national level, there are changes which are taking place, and different kind of, like people was state and different actors are there. So it's not only about, when we talk about conversations, I mean, I think we are moving away from the typical idea of sphere of influence. Conversation is more dialogic. Conversation is more soft in its approach rather than the hardcore approach towards uh, international relations or diplomacy, as we used to have, quote unquote, in the classical Cold War period. And also, South Asia is not a very monolithic term. When we talk about South Asia, Ashish Nandi famously said, "What is this idea of South Asia?" Whose imagination is it? Partho Chatterjee would like to put it like this: whose imagination is it that we are talking about? And also, there are, like 8 states in South Asia with different aspirations. Nepal, Bhutan, they know, I mean, they would like to identify themselves as land linked countries rather than landlocked countries. Bangladesh is I would say, a country of aspiring, a new generation is coming up. So, in this particular context, Riaz, I would like to start with you. How do you look at this particular concept of sphere of influence? I would come back to you again with the same, question. Yes.
Insofar as the sphere of influence is concerned, the way it is now being shaped are multi-layered as a matter of fact, because the cooperation and collaboration among the countries are at various levels. And particularly when we are talking about South Asia, despite the fact that it is not monolithic, yet in the context of the global politics, we tend to see it as one unit, or at least with the diversity within it, yet there is a single approach kind of thing. So, with respect to this sphere, this multi level or multi layered relationship are dominated or directed by some of the overriding issues, right? That is what the sphere of influence is all about. Meaning that, let us take in case of South Asia, the general understanding is that whether it is within the sphere of influence of United States or China, or given the rising aspiration of India, is it so? Or are they conflicting on at various levels? If you take the relationship between United States and the South Asian countries, Bangladesh, for example, it is quite varied, quite multi-layered within the security area, within the trade, and all these things. Same with India. Bangladesh relationship is historical and as well as various kinds of relations. But then again, we are witnessing the rise of China and China's, you know, sort of assertive policy. I would not call it aggressive. I always call it assertive policy. That they would like to see that these countries are, if not aligned, at least they are not exactly at a position that is contrary to them. So here the sphere of influence is in large measure on broader ideological issues are their affinity to them. It does not necessarily has to be complete alignment, complete subscription to it. But at least there is a broader understanding as to what role they will play at the global stage. So, on the one hand, the United States expectation, as we see it, is the South Asian countries, Bangladesh in particular, that they would like to see that, that it stands for, in the context of Indo-Pacific, they would like to see the Bangladesh is a player who supports an open Indo-Pacific without having any kind of restraint on it by any of these countries, whether it's China, whether it's India, or even United States. United States would like to see that Bangladesh plays a part with respect to its own governance, which is basically more accountable. That is what is. If you call it a sphere of influence, let us call it a sphere of influence. Yeah. On the other hand, China's understanding would be yes, of course, we would like to see that Indo-Pacific is an open, without the presence of certain countries or without the influence of the certain countries, the United States in particular. That is where we see these crashes, or at least some kind of contestation. But what is more important to me is there is some sort of alignment of interest between the United States and India. Given that India's larger point should be ideologically is more to this open Indo-Pacific, more to the democratic, participatory kind of governance in terms of economy, open one, is that are they aligning on this? That is a very interesting question to me, because my understanding is that despite the fact there's a very close relationship between the United States and India, it is definitely not alignment, and increasingly I see that there are contestation on how they see themselves in certain issues.
Thank you. So, so you do talk about an alignment of interests at one level where they would like to see the Indo-Pacific to be an open area, but perhaps to the exclusion of China. Are you
No,
suggesting
it's
that?
not an exclusion, but it is rather the influence, the what kind of influence China has in Indo-Pacific.
Okay, but on the other point where you talked about US would like to see more accountability and like maybe reforms in the governance, perhaps India's position might differ on that, and it would leave the South Asian countries on its own on that. Are you suggesting that?
United States approach to it is having more accountable system because of two reasons. One is its foreign alignment or at least affiliation should be determined based on the aspiration of the people. If it is a very smaller group of people making that decision, largely the likelihood of that of not being representative of the people's affiliation. That's number one. And the second thing is the business interest of the United States. It's foreign direct investment to see whether these countries are actually putting up various kinds of tariff and non-tariff barriers, and also uh, uh, laws and regulation that is going to prohibit or at least detrimental to the interest of the United States.
But there one doesn't see the overlap between uh, India and US. and one also does not observe a kind of a uniformity in US policy at the global level at this point.
Sure. I mean, it is because of the India's position. India's never been aligned to the United States. India
Yes.
doesn't want to be aligned to the United
Yes.
States. They have common issues there, but not necessarily that they, see eye to eye on every issue.
Okay.
That's why there is this differences. And also one other point is the aspiration of India to be a regional power, a hegemonic regional power, but also a player on the global stage.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Riaz. I'll come back to you. Yes, Samir, with the same question. How would you look at this, like particular idea of sphere of influence in this world of, I would like to put it this way, that this is a world where one is increasingly seeing, parallel but contradictory forces. On the one hand, you see people speaking out more. I would say that rising aspirations of the people. On the other hand, you see that there is, at the global level, there's the rise of populist regimes as well. So more penetration or deep state coming in. So how would you look at this idea of sphere of influence? And is it possible to have a sphere of influence as such that one talked about during the Cold War period?
No, when we talk about the sphere of influence in political science or in international relations, I mean, in the contemporary times, in the current scenario, we need to differentiate it the way used to define it in the Cold War era and in the post-Cold War era.
Okay.
In the pre-Cold War era, I would say it has more negative connotations, where big powers like US, USSR would always try to influence expand their influence in parts of the world, and that's led to the two worlds, I would say. In the post-Cold War era, it has more positive connotations for me, because wherever there is this sphere of influence, like South Asia, it is always based on mutual interests. Like US and India in the post-Cold War era, if you see, the relation has expanded. And it has expanded over the past 10, 15 years tremendously because of the mutual interests. And this time, India is not accepting anything on the terms of US or any other big power. It is also asserting its own interests. So that's how I differentiated it between two different phases. And US and India in South Asia and their sphere of influence in South Asia is there are so many areas what they are mutually agreeing to. There is a mutual agreement on several important critical issues.
Like?
Like China, trade is another important factor binding these two countries. There is also this sharing of information. There is also concerns related to terrorism. There is also issues related to Indo-Pacific, Asia-Pacific region. So there is a lot more mutual concerns, mutual agreements, mutual concerns, which binds them, and that's what the sphere of influence in South Asia has seen in a new direction, in a more positive connotation.
Samir, when you say that it has a positive connotation, but I mean, maybe it has a positive connotation for India and US, but how do you see that how the other states or entities in South Asia would look at it? I mean,
Of course, there are certain concerns. Not all the South Asian countries share that concern. Pakistan has certain concerns when we talk about growing India-US relations. Pakistan is occasionally sharing its concerns related to trade, expanding trade between sharing of technology, information, the other defense deals between these two countries. I think other countries may also benefit directly, indirectly, when it comes to the China's, because China is also trying to intervene into the region. And to counter that, these other countries, South Asian countries like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, by having a more balanced relation with other power bloc would benefit them in the long run, I would say, because nowadays all countries are trying to have a multiple relations at a multiple level, at a multi-layer relations. Like India is having a good relationship with Russia as always, and it is also trying to build a very good relations with USA. India Earlier, India used to have a good trade relations. In fact, the trade is still going on between India and US. So India and US, and simultaneously a lot of trade is going between India and China. So that is the same would be case with Bangladesh, same would be case with many other South Asian countries, except Pakistan. Pakistan has its own reason to exhibit its concerns for growing India-US relations, particularly with vis-a-vis defense. But other South Asian countries would also like to learn from these things, and they would also try to balance their relationship with US on one hand and China on the other hand. I would not say all the South Asian countries have the same concerns, but yes, Pakistan has a lot of concerns when it comes to the India-US relations and their sphere of influence.
Professor Mohsin, if I may, I mean, this is sorry
Yes,
for interrupting.
I would have come to you on this.
The entire issue of sphere of influence, and particularly when we are talking about India and United States,
Yes.
with respect to South Asia, their sphere of influence or their level of influence. For India, it's a precarious situation at one hand. Precarious in the sense that it does feel that it faces a challenge from China. Not only in the global context, regionally it faces. And this inroad that China has made in South Asia, in large measure, is a result of India's policy towards its neighbors that has created this space. Indian policymakers often blame China, but they seldom look at the mirror, what actually contributed. So, of course, they would like to see that China's influence is limited, which is understandable.
From India's point of
India's
view.
point of view. It's understandable. At the same time, does it mean that India would like to see United States influence growing in South Asia? My understanding is not. It doesn't.
No.
It rather, because it would rather like to see that US influence in South Asia is far more limited, and it would rather prefer that United States should view South Asia through the eyes of New Delhi, which United States has done for at least 2 decades or more. Post 9/11, 2001, that has been the policy. India was far more comfortable with that. Because why comfortable? Because they saw that it gives them an opportunity to influence the region. Now United States is taking a step differently, which is putting it in a very precarious situation. It's not only about having a difference on the Bangladesh issue, it is also about the difference about Sri Lanka with respect to Maldives. That's why the sphere of influence, the way, if we see that, okay, there are two circles, are they converging? Yes, US and India should converge, but it doesn't always converge. Not only because of the multi-layered issues, but also because of the conflict of interest.
Yes, conflict of interest in the long term. And, it is also a matter to be seen that, how far the US would want India to go in this region, and how far it would want its sphere of influence to be limited. Because no matter what, I mean, the way we see, or we have, once looks at international relations, US would like to see itself in a very pivotal or a dominant position in international politics. And India might, in this region, it might be, in alignment with India for certain plus factors at this point of time, which might not necessarily be so in the long run. So, this brings me to the second point. See, at this point of time, we see that China is the common denominator, or the common factor, or a major driving factor between India and US in this region. So, do you think a sustainable relationship or a sustainable, even if I don't call it alliance, alignment or a mutuality of interest can hinge on one single factor?
It is not actually based on one single factor. It is dominating at this point in conversation. And
Yes.
as we usually say in the
Mm-hmm.
United States, the Beltway culture, that they tend to see everything through one
Yes.
single prism always. Previously, it was war on terror. Everything seems to be through the prism of war,
Yes.
which was absolutely, you know,
Mm-hmm.
wrong and have been disastrous. Similarly, yes, there is this mindset in Beltway that yes, we need to select China. However, it is not only that because the one that you mentioned with respect to long term, which again, my understanding, India has not been very successful in looking at South Asia in a long term perspective. It has been very myopic in many respects. Uh, but it is not only anti China alignment or understanding. There's mutual interest lies in various other fields as well.
Yes.
Technology transfer is a major issue
Mm-hmm.
that is going to have an impact.
Mm-hmm.
And there are other issues. Trade is another issue. India
Mm-hmm.
being a large market, possibly
Mm-hmm.
one of the largest market. So
Mm-hmm.
U.S. interest is having India on board on this.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that just because we will have to face China, that's why we need India. Similarly, for India, it is not only because we need to have United States, because we need to push back China. India has its own
But that
interests.
is the dominant narrative.
At this point, the dominant narrative, but the dominant narrative should not be simply be seen as the reason. It is
Okay.
one of the factors
Yes, I
that
do agree with you on that.
that is what I see.
Samir, would you like to elaborate on this? And here I would like to have your comments on your Indian foreign minister when he said that India's relations with the United States is optimal, and he wouldn't put a scale to it. Uh,
Yeah, in addition, there are, of course, China is one of the strongest factors going back to the question. And as Professor Ali also rightly said, that there is trade because India is a big,
But
large,
India also has a large trade with
many other
China also,
China also.
and India also boasts that like India also says that uh, both China and India, these are civilizational states, which perhaps the United States is not.
Yeah, but India, because of China India relations, which have always been fluctuating. I mean, that's one of the reasons India is trying to explore other parts of the world, including USA. And in that respect, India is a large market for US investors. And India benefits because large investors come and invest in India. That's another important factor. But besides these two factors, there is also the democratic, the ethos that connects these two countries. India claims the Prime Minister Modi recently said that India is a mother of democracy. So that democratic ethos in these two countries is another important factor where they see mutually beneficial to each other. Then there is also Indo-Pacific, and there is also the regional stability, which is in the regional stability is important for India and also for this U.S. security concerns to address those concerns. So there is also this argument in certain quarters in USA that India in the long run may play an important role in stabilizing Afghanistan because US, as we all know, has literally failed in Afghanistan. So through India, they may try to build a new connection with the Taliban government. That's certain people who are arguing on this on this s- on this plat- on this thing. So they say Afghanistan can be addressed through India because Pakistan also is unstable. There is no particular government. So India can play in the long run an important role. So these are other important factors that binds these two countries, and this is one of the reasons that US is still trying to share good relations, defense mechanism with defense with India, despite that India has strongly never condemned Russia over Ukraine war. So US sees a lot of interest in India, and that binds these two countries over the past few decades, over the past few years rather.
Thank you, Samir. We are almost coming to the end of this very interesting conversation. I wish we could have continued. Particularly, I would have liked you to discuss more or dive more into this idea of stability in the region. But that is something maybe for the next uh, round of conversation.
Absolutely.
And Riaz, what do you see? I mean, if you can say it in 2 minutes, which I know I'm doing injustice to both of you, but as the major challenges that India-US relations might be facing in the future.
3 points that I see are major challenges. One is the technology transfer
Okay.
limitation of it. How much United States would actually be ready, and how much India is ready to accept the technology that is available. So that would remain a contentious issue as we see the negotiations have been going on, a protracted negotiation. That's a number one. Number two, the how much United States actually is considering beyond rhetoric as a true ally within India, because India's behavior to a certain extent have frustrated many of the analysts and policymakers in Washington, and it is growing over the years, particularly over the last 18 months that I have seen. It has grown too much because of this. The third is the values question. Values questions is for a long time it has been understood that the relationship between the United States and India is a large measure based on the democratic value. Given the India's serious democratic erosion, and which is reflected when Mr. Biden was in New Delhi, he was not allowed to speak about it. He had to go to Vietnam. When he was in Vietnam, he made comments. So these are the differences and challenges that they are going to face in the coming years.
Thank you so much, Riaz. Yes, please.
Yeah, few points on this. Of course, U.S. position on Kashmir has always been changing, and that irritates India. And recently, we had a visit by U.S. envoy to Pakistan administered Kashmir, which India claims as Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Some would call it. And the envoy on his visit to this Pakistan administered Kashmir used the term Azad Kashmir. That irritated India, and that changing position over Kashmir is always irritating India. That's one of the important challenges. There is also this condemnation of various terrorist groups operating from Kashmir against Indian state. That's another important challenge for these two countries. And there is also this concerns, as Professor Ali rightly said, there are certain concerns in US over the minority issues in India. There have been some concerns raised by the various think tanks in USA over the minorities security issues in India. That's another challenge. Nuclear proliferation, I would say, is another challenge between these two countries, and also the India's neutral position over Ukraine war or Russia's invasion of Ukraine is another, where India has never come openly and consistently condemning this Russian invasion of Ukraine. That's something where these two countries are facing a lot of challenge, and that may hinder their relations in the long term. But immediately they are bound by certain immediate concerns and immediate interests. But in the long run, these may play a role, and these may see a different directions. These two countries, I will say.
Thank you so much, Samir, and thank you so much, Dr. Ali Riaz. It was a pleasure. It's a pleasure talking to both of you, and we have almost come to the end of this session. And it, like any other relations, relations have their ups and downs, but we'll look forward towards a future where it would be a sustainable and relationship where when we talk about stability, the stability must not be an hegemonic stability. It must engulf or encapsulate the aspirations of the peoples of the region and must take into account the differentials that exist within this region, taking into account the interests of all the countries involved. That is how we want to imagine the future South Asia. With that note, we would like to end this session. Thank you very much.